Alrighty, I think we should be going on right now. We'll see here. You've verified it for me that we're live yet? Oh, how nice of you. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to assume we are.
You're going to have to start blogging about your bike.
All right. Steve. Well, welcome to the Adult One Bible Study. And my name's Norm Ellis. This is Grace Baptist Church. Glad you're with us online and here in our classroom. We're going to be talking about Mark 8, and then we're going to look at Mark 9, verse 1 as well. So we're going to dip just barely into chapter 9. So have your Bibles ready for that. And the title today is Followed. And the main idea is that Jesus calls people to faithfully follow him. So let's begin with a word of prayer, then we'll start. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this time we have to study your word. And Lord, in this very important area of discipleship, Lord, help us to understand these principles, these concepts, Lord, that we're going to be talking about in these verses. Thank you again for everyone who's here today. Lord, just pray to be with Gurley, keep her safe after her fall that she had and help her to get better. And also Hazel after her accident. And also be with my son and his wife as they recover from the house fire they had. Thank you for all you've done. In your son's precious name we pray. Amen. So, glad to have everybody here today. And you may or may not have heard my son Peter and his wife, their house burned down. So, basically lost everything that was in the house. Luckily, all their animals were safe. And their cars are okay. So, it is the house. They've only been in the house like 6 months, 4 months, something like that. So they have really good insurance because everything's up to date. So they'll be getting, the insurance person has already talked to them and stuff, so it sounds pretty good. They're going to get a trailer to begin with. Excuse me. And put it on the property so they can keep the animals still. They got a bunch of goats and horses and cats and dogs and stuff like that.
You know what was interesting though? I got a picture of that house before you posted it.
Oh, it was on Channel 12.
Yeah, I got that before you
I saw
posted,
it
so I'd
too.
already seen the picture.
Well, I waited because they told me, they said, don't put it on social media. So I said, okay, fine. So I waited. And then they posted something about an hour after that talking about it. So I said, okay, fine, I guess it's all right now. So then after that, I saw that. I said, okay, yeah. And so yeah, I had seen it, but I was told not to post anything, so I didn't. I followed. But yeah. It was a very tragic situation. So be in prayer with them because this week has been a real rough week.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Do they know what caused?
Yes, defective wiring. They think a fan in a bathroom downstairs, which is really, really weird because they don't use that fan and it was not on. So I think, okay, because of my electrical background, I think somebody screwed up and they wired the hot side to the fan and the neutral through the switch. Because that's another way that can happen. And then when things get corroded and things maybe short, if it shorts a neutral, you're not going to have a fire. If it shorts a hot, you'll have a fire. So something like that probably is what happened. And it's something you'll never know because you're not going to take everything apart when you buy a house. You can't see all those things. It's a rough time, but they're making it through it. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Really are.
All right. Well, anyway, so today we're in session number 6. If you're following along at home or here in the thing, and would you like to look at a copy here? I have one for you if you'd like to look at it.
I have it. I just forgot. It was right underneath my Bible, and I was
Okay, you can look at it.
And you
here.
ran out without it. I do that all the time.
That's okay. I do it too. That's why I got an extra copy or two. So following. This is kind of the topic today. And so a disciple follows somebody, right? So that's why we're going to talk about following. And so to get us thinking about that along those lines, in your handout, page 1 of handout 1, you'll see it says, consider some world leaders, both past and present, that you may know of, both popular and unpopular. So think about it, okay? And what we're going to look at is what qualities might have drawn people to follow these leaders, and why are adults willing to surrender a measure of independence to follow these leaders, and what would they gain by doing so? Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate that. So I wrote down some examples, You may know some better ones or some other ones that you'd like to also maybe mention, but George Washington, he's a world leader of the past, right? Martin Luther, and I'm not talking about Martin Luther King Jr., I'm talking about Martin Luther, who read the Reformation,
Yeah.
shook up the world. Winston Churchill, great leader from England.
Yes.
Alexander the Great, he was a conqueror of the known world. Joan of Arc, a very interesting person, a lady who led the forces in England, I believe. MLK Jr., big person in civil rights. Napoleon, of course, another emperor who also wanted to rule the world, didn't quite make it. Mahatma Gandhi, you probably know him. He was very much into the area of non-violence and stuff. Vladimir Lenin, dun, 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 who brought us the wonderful concept of communism, him and Karl Marx. And Lenin was instrumental in pushing it into this, Russia and then the Soviet Union. Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves in America, a very instrumental person who also saved the Union. A lot of things there. Also took away a lot of states' rights, which is a mixed bag, isn't it? Adolf Hitler, we know about him, don't we? Dun, 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 dun. King Solomon, very important person, especially in the Old Testament. Genghis Khan, one of the barbarians who wanted to rule the world also, and did a good job of a portion of it, ruling it. Very brutal, bloody person. Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was the person who took over from the Medes and the Persians, I think it was. No. Babylonians, that's right. And he was one of the kings of the Medes and the Persians. And he was instrumental in doing what?
Freeing the Jews.
Yeah, letting the Jews go back home again. Yeah, very instrumental thing. Did any of the leaders come to mind?
Oh, Trump, of course.
Well, we have present leaders today. We might include Trump. We might include Biden. For good or bad, I'm not saying any of them are good or bad. I'm just saying Ronald Reagan.
I can't come up with names,
Yeah.
but the Polish commander of the army and the German commander of the army in 1820 when they went down to Austria to break out Vienna.
Oh.
Because Vienna was surrounded by the Turks and was
Ottomans.
just about ready to fall.
Yeah.
So the Ottomans.
Yep.
And
There's a lot from history, isn't there? A lot from history.
Charles Martel.
And if you
Charles Martel.
Yes, I've heard that name before too. There's a lot of them that if they had not done what they did, the world would be substantially different. Julius Caesar, very important Roman emperor.
that too.
Yeah, he died a very inglorious death. And but anyway, what qualities of these people might be that drew them people to them, that drew people to them? Think about that. And while you do, I have some verses to hand out. Who would like to do a verse for me? Oh, right. I see a volunteer. And, I see another volunteer. Now, some of these I'm hoping to get to. I'm not guaranteeing I'll get to. Okay, you want to do one? You want to do one? All right. How about that one? Let's see. Number 3. Would you like to do number 3? I see that the last one. Yep. I got the last one here. So Matthew makes it in here. Give it to him. Go ahead.
You know, I think to be any type of leader, you have to have what I call stage presence
Okay.
or charismatic.
Charisma.
Where you're drawn to that person.
Who speaks your language.
Yes.
Who says
Yeah.
it in a way that you can understand, right? Great leaders can do that. They can stir the masses.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the things, and there are arts. There's arts to this, by the way.
Yes.
Adolf Hitler was not a great speaker, but he had great sense of presence, and the people who worked for him knew how to craft a stage around him with the pomp and the ceremony and the sounds and the sights, you know.
I think President Nixon did the same thing. He wasn't, whether good or bad, right?
Yeah.
He surrounded himself with the right people.
Uh-huh.
And for that matter, anybody in a management position, if you don't surround yourself with the right
That's
people,
true. That's
you're
very
not
true.
gonna.
Yeah.
George Bush did that.
Yes, he did.
Got the best of the best.
So charisma, definitely there. What else? How about maybe their message that they say? Would that be something that might draw
Yes.
people to them?
Mhm. And some people have, well, you didn't ask for it, but they're pedigree.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that person is part of this family. I
Yeah.
trust that family. Yeah, yeah. Of course, we see that in England because we see the kings and queens, and they're all related to each other. So they have a pedigree that goes way back. I bought a big poster-sized chart from the first king to the present, well, at that time, queen, because a cousin of mine, she is a what do they call that? That's a name for it. Oh, something file. She likes the English kings and queens stuff.
Family tree.
Yeah, it's their family tree. It shows all the connections to all of it. It's really
Dynasties or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. But there's a special term just for English, studying English kings and queens. Something file. It's it's not a big important thing. But it could be the pedigree, you're right. Could be the message, could be how they give the message, right? It could be a lot of things. But why are adults so willing to surrender sometimes a measure of independence just to follow these leaders? If you think of the ones who followed Lenin, for instance, or followed Hitler, you know, they gave up certain things, didn't they, in their life?
Yeah.
And why would they do that, you think?
To be safe.
Be safe? Okay, yeah. The person promised them, I forgot about that, safety and security. That's another reason why people will follow people, right? And they felt that this person would keep them maybe safe from their enemies, right? Yeah. A chicken in every pot. Have you ever heard that term before?
No, I never heard
Yeah.
of that.
Oh, really?
No.
A chicken in every pot. That was one of our past presidents. One of their ways of securing the vote was to promise, in other words, that you'd never go hungry. And I
Is
forgot.
that Hoover or FDR?
I can't
I
remember.
think it was FDR.
It might be further back even than FDR. You'd have to Google that for me. Who said a chicken in every pot?
Where's your calculator?
I don't remember that one.
But yes, I mean, and that's what a lot of the, let's face it, the communist and socialist people, hey, everybody likes Santa Claus. You mean I can get everything I want to and not have to do much for it? Hey, that's great. And that's what they kind of offer sometimes. So there's a lot of things though. Some are good things, some are bad things, right?
Hoover.
Hoover. It's Hoover. That's right. Hoover said that.
It was put in as an advertisement
Uh-huh.
in the paper.
So maybe not he might not have said it directly, but those who supported him did, apparently. Herbert Hoover, known in our country as the person who brought us what great thing?
1928 is when that was.
He brought us the great,
The Great Depression, yes.
Yes.
or that's what people like to blame him for.
Sure.
I'm not saying he did actually, you understand, but he took the rap, let's put it that way, because it happened during his administration. Anyway, going on. What do people gain by doing this? And we talked a little bit about it already. They gain some security. They gain some maybe some measure of
Power.
power. There you go. That's what they offered in the Communist Party. You could become a party member. You could be in charge. We'll give you charge on this area right here. Wow. I'm not very smart, but I can be a party member and I can take care of these people for them, or I can take stuff from them maybe as a taxes. I don't know. A lot of reasons for wanting power. Sometimes you think you can do good. Sometimes you want to make money, right? There's a lot of things there. In our lesson book, let me see here. Is this the one I wanted to read or not? Maybe not. Maybe something else. Where is that other thing? It must be here somewhere. There we go. I found it. Okay, so in the introduction, I'm going to read a little more than just what the book has, but the book has part of this on page 55. In 1897, I gave it away already. Oh well. I was going to ask a question here. How old do you think this is? What would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? You think that's not that long ago, right? It wasn't. It was 1897. There's a book by Charles Sheldon published in his steps, What Would Jesus Do? The novel is about a pastor who challenges his church members to consider what Jesus would do in every situation, good and bad, that they faced. The popularity of Sheldon's novel cannot be denied. The question it raises, what would Jesus do? this question cannot be ignored. We're aware that Jesus has called us to do what? Follow him, right? In a way that points people towards him. Asking ourselves how he would do that can be an important step for translating awareness into action. Being aware is one thing, but acting on it, right, is different. In Mark 8:31 through 9:1, which is the verses we're going to look at today, Jesus taught his disciples how to follow him. What it means to be a disciple. Let's translate to another phrase, right? That's what basically we're talking about, right? We've heard this term before, disciple before. It says, as we study this passage for this week, focus on Jesus' expectation and demands for you. Identify areas of your life where WWJD. Now there we go. That's probably familiar to a lot of people, right? Have you seen that on a bumper sticker on the back of a car?
Not
Some people wear it on their
recently.
wrist.
Or on a wrist? Yeah, wrist.
I've seen it on people.
But they had,
Yes.
like about 10, 20 years ago, something like that was very popular, right? Maybe it's further back, maybe I'm dating myself. But anyway, what would Jesus do? It needs to shift from being a catchy slogan on the back of a car to a genuine motivation for your words and actions. Excuse me. While the game Follow the Leader might have been entertaining to play it as a child, most adults would rather be the one who's in charge. Well, maybe. Our sense of auto-autonomy may be challenged by a request from a leader to follow them. At the very least, we prefer a neutral position. When given an option to lead, follow, or get out of the way, some would choose the latter, it says. So in which role would you prefer to serve, leader or follower? Interesting question. How about it?
I think a lot of times we navigate towards one of those, not necessarily making a decision, but it's just kind of who we are.
Yeah. There are personality types that are maybe better suited to following. You know, there are some other personality types that just want to have the charge, take charge. You know, to be president, oh my gosh, you must really have that drive hard, because think of what you have to put up with. Holy cow! All the enemies that are aligned against you. You know, you have your side, and then that side just hates you. You know, it's just gotta be rough. I have to admire somebody who would want to be president in that sense. I don't necessarily admire everybody who wants to be president. But you know what I mean, that characteristic, right?
The position itself. You
Yeah,
have to have some respect for the position.
Mm-hmm. So, where was I? What fears arise when someone asks you to follow them?
Depends on where they're going.
But yeah, is this person going to lead me the right direction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that thought that, you know, yeah, okay, do I trust that person? There's the word I was looking for earlier. Trust. Well, how does trust figure into this as a leader?
Reputation. It has to be earned, of course.
If you want to be the leader, you have to have trust in those that are following you. You do to a certain extent, don't you?
Yeah.
Because they're doing things for you, right? But in other sense of the word, though, following takes a lot of trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does.
And some people have a hard time with trust issues. Let's put it that way. Because don't we all feel like we know what's best for ourselves a lot of times? Don't we? Yeah, most of us do. And that's that selfness. Okay, there's another word, selfishness. Right? We want what we want. And sometimes that aspect will go into, you know, no, I'm not going to follow you because I want to do what I want to do. And especially in America, it seems like we are very independent-minded that way. Children are very much that way. If you try to tell a kid what to do, it says, no. That's the first word they learn.
You can't tell me what to do.
When I was doing recess for this school, that was my job as a recess person, I heard this so many times. You're not the boss of me. Yes, I am. You're going to sit down on that bench for a while after what you did to the other kid. You're not the boss of me. Yes, I am. And guess what? They followed me. Because I did have a little intimidation factor.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking elementary school, and I'm a big guy, so like, okay, Mr. Ellis. I love that job. What can I say? But anyway, we all tend to follow someone for direction or guidance, don't we? And it can be a lot of things, though. Let's say I don't know how to take a picture. well, I want to maybe follow Steve because Steve's had a lot of training, so he's going to give me some advice because I trust him and I know his knowledge level, right?
It's a lie.
Right. Well, it could be that way for fishing. My wife does crocheting. She could be somebody that somebody would want to take advice from her. You know, those kind of things, right? So experts too. I forgot to mention that earlier. If somebody's a recognized expert. Anyway, so we all tend to follow somebody for direction or guidance. In today's study, we're going to look at what it means to follow Jesus and to allow Him to become the ultimate leader in our lives. Whoa. You mean He wants to lead? Wow, I don't know about that, right? So, we have a map. We're going to be talking about this place called Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi is right there. So, he's way up here, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's out of the Galilee area that he normally would be in. He's more in the pagan parts of Ulatha, Olatha, there we go, and Galatius, which is the Galatian church, I guess, was. And the other area, Tyre up here, the capitalist area and stuff like that. So this is where he's at currently. He's in this area here. And there's also a map on your handouts that shows that too. For those of you at home, I hope you have the handouts because it shows it on there too. I got it circled with an arrow. You can't miss it.
Oh, there it is, no.
It should be easily seen. You see this again.
Yes, it is. You did a good job.
There we go. Yes. All right. Anyway, so let's look at a little bit in our book here. Just something I want to touch on. Some area called Understanding the Context, and it gives us a little bit of idea here. Jesus' healing of the blind man in Bethsaida varied from the normal pattern. This was a two-step healing in which the man initially had partial sight restored. Remember that? And he saw things that looked like trees, he said. What was true of him physically was true spiritually of the disciples. Their understanding of Jesus and his mission was fragmented, in need of completion. They sort of understood, but did they fully understand? Now, there's something that I need to probably talk about here real quick, is the understanding of Messiah. Messiah was seen as a religious leader, but primarily in a lot of people's minds back then as a military
To
leader.
conquer.
A person like King David. And they had the Roman yoke around them, and they wanted that Roman yoke removed. So they were looking for that kind of Messiah. Some would think this would encompass one person. Some people thought there would be a religious one and be a military one. Two people perhaps. They didn't know. They didn't know their scriptures either. Because it talked about it and told them exactly what you're going to get from Messiah. Anyway, the question Jesus asked his disciples in verse 27 did not greatly differ from the one he asked the blind man in verse 32. What do you see? And what do you say are related. One's level of spiritual perception determines one's viewpoint about Jesus. After asking what popular opinion was about him, he asked the disciples, what have people been saying about me, right? Jesus asked the disciples then to state their position, and Peter's response was, "You are the Christ." Now, does that mean he knew exactly who Jesus was?
No, I don't think they have full understanding. Not at all.
Because we see what he did later, don't we?
Yes.
Because who was Christ? What were some of the attributes of Christ? He was a great spiritual leader, we know that. What else though?
He was kind.
He was kind, yeah. What else do we know about Jesus?
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable. It is a really, really big thing here.
He spoke with authority.
Well, he spoke with authority, right? What is he?
The Christ.
Son of God.
Son
There
of
you go. God the Son. In flesh. Standing right in front of them. Nature obeyed him. The water stilled. He was able to multiply food for the hungry. He was able to, somebody who was born lame, tell him to stand up and walk.
And walk. Carry your bed.
And he was able to. People who could not hear. Right in front of them. And you'd say, well, I would have believed he was no. He probably been just like they would. They had a hard time with this. And this is what this is about. This is what we're talking about. But Jesus' response was real basic, though. You are the Christ, he says. says 6 days after Peter's confession and Jesus' instructions about his death and resurrection, he took his 3 closest disciples and went up to the mountain. Perhaps after the startling revelation by Jesus of his coming suffering, he wanted to bring encouragement and perspective to the minds of Peter, James, and John. Those are the leaders, right? The elements of the transfiguration, mountain, cloud, brightness, all appeared in the Old Testament in connection with divine revelation. Sounds familiar. Moses went up on the mountain to meet with God. God led them in the wilderness with fire and smoke, cloud, and brightness. When Moses came off the mountain, they were afraid of Moses. You know why?
Because he was glowing.
His face was glowing. He'd been in the presence of God. He had to put basically a sack over his head because they were scared.
Wow.
Think about that. Anyway, so nevertheless, the disciples struggled to understand after Jesus commanded them to keep silent until after his resurrection. Instead of asking about the subject, they asked him a question about the prophet Elijah, whom they had seen appear on a mountain. After all, they reasoned, wasn't he to appear physically, not just in a vision, before the Messiah would come? Somebody was to come to lead the way before Messiah. That was John the Baptist, who came in the power, in the same way as Elijah. Not Elijah. Elijah did not reincarnate into John the Baptist. That's not right. John knew that. He said that as much. Jesus assured them that the prophecy was correct, referring to John the Baptist and his martyrdom. And as he had told them previously, there was suffering and pain ahead in his own future as a son of God. John's ministry was to point to Jesus, John the Baptist, and his own personal persecution foretold what was awaiting Jesus, and I would say his followers.
Yeah.
So, that's the context of what we're talking about here. So let's look at the first point here. And we're going to be talking about in Mark chapter 8, verses 31 through 33. And our first step is get behind 31 through 33, like I said, of Mark 8. I don't know if I remember to say, but the main point today is that Jesus calls people to faithfully follow him. That's up there as well. So let's see here. Oh, I want to read a verse first. That's what I want to do. Here we go. So, and this is an extra verse. Extra. No charge. Matthew 16, 15 through 17. And Jesus said to them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Peter said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." What do you think Peter felt right then? I bet he was off the ground about 3 feet.
Yeah, I got it right.
I got it right. And
I'm a little happy now.
And I'm blessed. Wow. I'm hot to trot. I'm like probably number one of this group now, right behind Jesus, right? Now in Mark it doesn't use the word "blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah." It doesn't use that, which is interesting because Mark is probably the recollections of Peter. That's right. So Peter's not tooting his own horn, in other words, is what it looks like to me. But the other disciples who were there, they heard that, and Matthew recorded it here. Luke doesn't record it in exactly that manner, but I think it was probably there. I think that that's exactly what happened. So in these first 3 verses, I want you to notice how Peter completely missed what Jesus was telling them in these verses coming up. I was also going to read the full text here really quick. Yeah, let me read a couple verses here. 22 through 29. And they came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to Jesus, and he implored him to touch him. Taking the blind man by the hand, he brought him out of the village, and after spitting on his eyes and laying his hands on him, he asked, "What do you see?" And he looked up, and he said, "I see men, for I see them like trees walking around." Then again he laid his hands on the eyes, and he looked intently, and was restored, and began to see everything clearly. And he went, and he sent him home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." And Jesus went out along with his disciples to the village of Caesarea Philippi. We talked about where that was, right? And on the way, he questions his disciples, saying to him, "Who do people say I am?" And they said, "John the Baptist." And others say, "Elijah." But others, "One of the prophets." And he continued by questioning, "But who do you say I am?" And Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ." And he warned them not to tell anyone about him, about that aspect. So, now remember, also Herod thought that Jesus was John the Baptist. Remember that?
Yeah.
Whom he killed. And so he thought he'd come back to life. So he was really, really concerned about that as well. So at this point here, we come up to our verses, and I want to make sure we get that context there. So notice how Peter completely missed what Jesus was telling him. Go ahead. Who's got the first one?
I do.
Go ahead and read that one for me. 31 through 33, please.
Okay. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and disciples and be killed. And after 3 days, rise again. And he was stating the matter plainly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning around and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on God's interest, but man's." That's tough.
Wow. So you're feeling pretty good, Peter. And now this happens, right? It says he began to teach them what he's going to be suffering. Be rejected and be killed. And after 3 days, rose again. They forgot that part, didn't they?
Yeah.
They forgot that part. And he was stating the matter plainly, it says.
Yeah.
There's no misunderstanding. It's not a parable. It's no way to misunderstand this. And it says Jesus then was taken aside by Peter and rebuked. Now, so did Peter have a good idea who the Messiah was, and in fact that was Jesus? Do you think? No. This witnesses that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's rebuking God the Son. So I don't think he understood that clearly, did he? No. Rebuke. I was going to read about rebuking. Where was that? There it is. Well, yeah, it's a lot of it. But Peter was uncomfortable with what Jesus was saying. This is in the Bible commentary. Largely because he shared the common messianic expectations of the day. We talked about that already, right? Who the Messiah was going to be. That military leader is going to get rid of the Romans, right? And probably tell us about God. But Peter could not comprehend a Messiah who is going to do these things. Suffer and die. It would be a hard thing to understand, wouldn't it? So he's rebuking Messiah. Rebuke means to criticize sharply. In hindsight, believers understand how brash and impulsive Peter could be. However, while Peter was the one doing the rebuking, the other disciples would have shared the sentiment. And that's true. We see that a lot of times. It'll be like when Jesus appeared to the disciples, they believed, except for Thomas. He wasn't there. Well, if he'd been there, he would have believed too. There's other situations similar to that. So we know that in this case, the other disciples were watching and listening, right? Because it's been recorded. Let's see, Mark 8:27-30, number 2. Now, did I already read that verse? Oh,
I have number 2.
I might have already read that one. Oh,
I
I
don't
did.
think- did you?
Go ahead, though.
Okay.
My fault.
Jesus went out with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the road he asked his disciples, "Who do people say I am?" They answered him, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others, one of the prophets. But you," he asked again, "who do you say I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Messiah." And he strictly warned them to tell no one about him.
Now, we already talked about these verses already, except for the last part. Does that look familiar to you?
Wasn't the first time he said that.
Yeah. You are the Christ. And he warned them to tell no one about him, about that aspect. Now, that's a curious thing, isn't it? But we see him doing that before. When he would cast out demons, the demons would say, "I know who you are. You're the Son of the living God." And he commands the demons to shut up and get out. When he healed people, they would want to go tell him. He says, no, don't tell anybody. Just go and show yourself to the priest, right?
Yeah.
And yet they'd still go and tell. But he warned them not to tell anyone. So there's reasons for that at the time. It was this mystery of why he did this. And it's actually probably not that great a mystery, except in the fact that we don't understand it being humans. But there was an order to when things would happen.
Yeah.
And also, people were not ready to accept it. Look at Peter. Was he ready to accept what Messiah meant? No, he wasn't, was he? So I think that's a good point to remember. So what are some key differences in Peter's words and Jesus' reactions when comparing the first part to the second part? In other words, the part where he confessed Jesus as being Messiah, and now this part where he's rebuking Messiah. Maybe I've given part of that away already. Oh well. What are some key differences in Peter's words here and Jesus' reaction?
I don't think Peter was doing it to offend him. I think because they were all so close. I just can't imagine it.
Mhm.
But clearly Satan was working in him at some, you know what I mean?
Could be.
Yeah.
And it's interesting if you read carefully. It says, but turning around and seeing his disciples. So Peter didn't do this quietly. He took him aside a little bit, but he was still within earshot apparently. And he's in front of others rebuking the Messiah. Think about that for a moment. So did it require some strong action on the part of Jesus, you think? Yeah, it did. Because what did Jesus then do to him?
Call him Satan, basically.
Well, yes, but he rebuked him too, only much more strongly, by referring to him as what? Satan. So he's doing Satan's bidding here, is what he's saying. You're saying I cannot, he's basically saying to Peter, you're saying I cannot be rejected by the chief priests and scribes. I cannot be killed, and I won't be raised 3 days again. Basically, he's rebuking Jesus for saying those things. What was the Messiah's task? Job.
That was his job. Yeah.
Those things.
So he's basically saying, Jesus, your idea of salvation, nah, it's not going to happen. Thank goodness Peter wasn't successful in that.
And once again, we have hindsight.
Yes, we do. We
You
do.
know, like I said, I don't think Peter was trying to.
In the moment, Peter
Yeah,
was
yes.
saying these things.
I think he thought he was doing good.
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah.
I think you're right. You're going to say probably,
I realized that, how can someone come back from the dead? I
Yeah.
think that was the most astonishing.
Mhm.
You're
Yeah.
coming
Mhm.
back from the dead.
it was beyond his comprehension.
Mm.
Sure. Yeah.
But yet, what had Peter seen?
All those miracles.
Those
Yes.
miracles.
Yeah, it's a
We're-
hard thing to understand.
Jesus raised people from the dead. And he even spoke the word, and a centurion's servant girl, I think it was healed. And he raised up this widow's son who was dead, being carried away in a coffin. You know, he saw all these things.
It's like, who's gonna raise you? You were raising these people.
Yeah.
Who's gonna raise
You have a limitation. You have a limitation. You can't do it to yourself. That's what Peter's saying.
Yeah.
But God doesn't have a limitation.
No.
And now, did he say it just this one time of what was going to happen to him?
No.
He actually said it many times, and I think we have those verses later here. I might get to them. We'll see. I might. I hope I do. So anyway, it was an even stronger rebuke. Okay, and if we look at another verse here in Matthew 4:10, did I give that to anybody? I did not, did I?
Oh, number 4?
Matthew 4. No, not number 4. Matthew 4:10.
No,
I think that was one I wrote down, and I was going to read. I didn't get a chance to print that one out, so I'll go ahead and read that one. Matthew 4:10. I think it's Matthew 4:10. Oh yeah, this is when Jesus is being tempted by the devil. Somebody already mentioned part of this, I think. Remember, in 3 different ways he tempted him, right?
Yeah.
And at the end, in Matthew's account, Jesus said to him, "Go, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God and serve him only." And the devil left him, and behold, angels came and began to minister to him. So what we see here is Satan is saying, you know, I know you think you got this message, but all you got to do is bow down to me, and you don't have to die. You know, that would work out. So essentially he's saying, you don't have to do these things either. So Peter is in the mode of Satan here. And what he says to him is very similar to what he said to the devil in the temptation, right? He said, you're not setting your mind on God's interest, but man's. Well, Satan was not setting on man's or God's. It was on his own interest. But essentially, he got the same rebuke that he gave Satan. Wow. And this is from the man who earlier had said what?
You are the Christ.
You are the Christ.
Christ, yeah.
And Jesus gave him a positive affirmation. Says, blessed are you for saying that. Wow. So we see a big swing for Peter. A big swing, don't we?
Yeah.
So anyway, we see the key differences between these two things where Peter had said you're the Messiah and was praised for it, and then later, in this verses here, he was rebuked for saying, no, you're not going to die. And some admissions already, we don't want to see anybody die, do we? And so Peter did not comprehend that this is his task. This is Jesus' task. To him, it would be the end of everything if he died.
But it was important that Peter understood that Jesus was telling them about his crucifixion and resurrection, and Peter wasn't getting
He wasn't getting
the
it.
whole picture. He
Exactly. And we talked about leadership earlier, and one word I forgot was faithfulness. Followers must be faithful to that leader, right? If it's a good leader and you want to attain the goal, you must be faithful. Now, does it mean you understand everything? No. And so this is something important to see, is that Peter was not being a faithful follower here, was he? Because this is a real challenge for Peter, a big challenge. Will I let Jesus be a leader or not in my life right now? Well, he said he's going to die. I'll rebuke him because, we don't want him to die. So he's not following, is he?
No.
He's not following here. This is a curious thing to see. Now, Peter had other issues too. We know that he also denied Christ. But did Peter have a big job in the church
Yes, he did.
after that? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, because Jesus saw in him that potential to be that great leader. And that's why he told him, not once, not twice, but 3 times, asked him, do you love me? If you love me, feed my sheep, care for my sheep. That's very touching to think about that too.
When Jesus had resurrected, I was looking at this, I think a couple of weeks ago. He told Mary Magdalene to go and to tell my disciples and Peter.
And Peter. That's exactly right. Why did he do
Because
that?
I saw that Jesus had a private talk with Peter sometime, before he went to the cross. And it didn't say what he said to Peter, but Peter was still, I think he was still doubting himself and the old voice, me, I've done all this and this, but telling Mary Magdalene that, hey, Peter's still mine too.
Yeah. Now, Satan had demanded to sift Peter like wheat. Remember that? And he said he was going to pray for him. Remember that too? So did Jesus care for Peter?
Oh, yes.
Yes, he
Oh
did.
my goodness. He made it a special point to talk to Peter after the resurrection and to ask him, do you love me? To make sure he stopped firmly in his mind. You can see how Jesus really cared for his disciples too. Anyway, we could talk about that a long time, but we got to move on. Peter was promoting this worldview which diminished the fact that Jesus had to die. The cross was central to Jesus' mission, and Peter was trying to deny that. Think about that. He rejected every suggestion that it was not necessary for providing salvation. In other words, he was saying, you don't need to die. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Peter was also the one who struck the high priest's servant in the Garden of Gethsemane with a sword, if you remember right.
Yeah.
And cut off his ear. Malcolmus? Something like that. Anyway, so Jesus told them many times what to expect. That's the other thing. That was the verses I was going to ask for, but you know what? I'm not going to worry about those. In more than one account, he said essentially the same thing here. I'm going to have to suffer at the hands of these Jewish leaders. I'm going to be scourged. I'm going to be beat upon. I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to die. And then I'm going to be raised up 3 days later. And that part, like I said, they kind of forgot about that because in their minds, that can't happen. You mentioned it before. You raised those people from the dead. Yeah, you healed those people, but you can't do it to yourself. You're dead. How can you do it? He didn't understand. He didn't have that conception in his brain yet, right? Let's look at the next point. Next point is follow me. And for these next 5 verses, I want you to notice who Jesus spoke to regarding discipleship. It's kind of an interesting thing to see. Who has number 4? 4. Wait a minute, did I not? Oh, number 3. Did I hand that out?
Yes.
Oh, that's the verses I was going to do. Thank you. Go ahead and read those verses.
For he was teaching his disciples and telling them, the Son of Man is to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. When he has been killed, he will rise 3 days later. You want me to go ahead
And go ahead and read Mark 10 now also.
I'll get there. Saying, behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, spit on him, and scourge him, and kill him. And 3 days later, he will rise again.
He took the 12 disciples aside when he said that, by the way. So was Peter and the disciples warned what was going to be happening? Many times. Many times. These are just the accounts that we have. So let's look at the next part here. Like I said, for these next 5 verses, notice who Jesus spoke to regarding discipleship. And number 4, who's got number 4?
I've got.
Go ahead.
And he summoned the crowd and his disciples and said to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.
Okay, I was supposed to have this poster up and I forgot to. Envision right there this handout. You have it in your handouts. It's handout number 3. It says, if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Wow. Now that's some interesting words, isn't it? And that's the key that we want to look at right now on this part here. So we have a basic outline now of what it means to be a disciple. What should you do? What 3 things?
Take up your cross.
Well, deny yourself first,
Well, deny yourself.
and then
Take
take up your cross, and then follow me, right? Follow him. So that's and he's telling the disciples this, but it's not just, it's whoever's listening at the point, by the way. And so, if I remember right, there's a part in the book about this too. Let me find it really quick. Yes, if you want to, you turn to page 60. And got some questions here. What are some practical ways that Christians can practice denying self? Denying self. And we got right here questions. Denying self. How do you also practical ways of taking up your cross? And how else can you follow Christ? So what does it mean to deny yourself? It's one of these terms that it's kind of almost cryptic to people, right?
Yeah.
And why is it so cryptic, do you think?
Because it can have a dual, well, it does have a dual meaning.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's not telling you deny your existing humanity,
Right.
because I just think that too. But it's a spiritual thing. You have to deny yourself of your way of doing things, your way of seeing things, and do things like Christ would do it, and see things through the eyes of faith, you know, like He wants us to.
Yes.
And that's not always easy to do.
To deny yourself, who are you most interested in? Most people, if you're honest. Yourself!
Yeah.
You know, well, I got to do this. I want to make sure I have this in my life. I want to make sure I plan for my future, you know, or whatever it might be. You know, it's a primary instinct. It's called self-preservation too. And it's not a bad thing in itself, except for the fact of how we deal with other people and things in our life when we forget who's really on the throne. And I meant to get one of these pictures that I remember from my childhood. I think it's got a picture of you on one side, there's a gulf here, and on the other side there's this throne. And on your side, I'm getting my pictures mixed up now. Okay, I guess it was, actually there was this throne room and the throne, and you're sitting on it. And you're supposed to get off that throne and let Jesus sit on the throne. That's what it was, yeah. I get my pictures mixed up in my mind. That's why I should have looked it up. We want to be on the throne. We want to be in charge of our own lives, right? And so in this picture that I was trying to remember, basically shows that we put Christ off the throne and we put ourselves on it. So to deny self means to take yourself off that throne, and instead Christ is on it, right? And we follow him. And in the couple paragraphs here on page 60, it talks about losing your life for Christ, essentially, right? And the main part is this second paragraph. It says, there is a great paradox expressed here. Those who seek to give their life meaning through their own efforts and attainments will eventually end up in a meaningless existence with no sense of who they really are or what truly matters. However, those who find their significance in Jesus and his mission, instead of a self-centered pursuit of fulfillment, receive that and much more by dying to your own agendas and denying the effectiveness of your own attempts to make life meaningful. We discover that what true life in Jesus really is. Did Peter want to deny himself?
Nobody wants to deny
Right,
themselves.
right.
I mean, we're selfish.
Right.
We're human, you know?
Remember the discussions the disciples had among themselves?
Who was the best?
Who's the best? Who's the
Yeah.
greatest? Can I be at your right hand? You know? And I think this is part of Peter's problem as well. He had this mentality of that's what Messiah is. Right. And what would it do for him if he was part of that group? You know, there's got to be some of that there. I'm not saying it was all his motivation, not saying it at all. I'm saying it's part of it, it's an element, perhaps, of what his problem was. And his problem was that he had his own self-interests. He didn't want to follow what Jesus' interests were.
I think he was trying to protect Jesus.
So we do the same thing, don't we? In a way. We like to do things our own way. So we need to do the same thing. We need to deny ourselves, like Jesus said, right? In other words, don't put ourselves on that throne, but put Jesus on that throne. And we talked about what would Jesus do. Remember that earlier? And this is part of that. Part of that is what would Jesus do? I'll write about the second one. It says, what are some practical ways Christians can practice taking up your cross? Ooh, that's a tricky one. What was the cross, first of all?
It was death, it was redemption. I hope I'm following this right.
Yeah. It was a picture of suffering.
Yeah.
In its basic sense, the cross was, of course, a Roman execution method that they stole from some other culture because they wanted a better system. I can't remember who it was that had it. They would impale people, and they took it and they refined it to a different way, so the person would die a real slow death and be very public. But the picture of this was you would carry your cross piece with you on your shoulder, that heavy, heavy burden. And remember, Jesus stumbled and couldn't go on, and they had to press into service Simon
Of Cyrene.
Cyrene, there you go. To help, right? But anyway, so the idea is you're carrying this load, this heavy load for Jesus. You know, it's what you're doing for the Lord, and sometimes you suffer because of it. And so you got to be willing to do that. It means you must be willing to take up your cross, to take on that thing. Now, that's a hard thing to do. No one here wants to suffer.
No.
So if you speak up on your, let's say at your job for Christ, and you know the boss doesn't like that, and maybe he's an atheist, maybe I don't know. But if you do that in such a way that he gets mad at you, that might not be a good thing. You know, that's just one example. But the early Christians, they would confess Christ when they were given an option. And who's Lord? Is it Caesar or is it Christos? And if they said Christos, they go into the arena and they die. There was this worship of the emperor at the time, and they did this. So that can come to that kind of situation too, can it? So that's what part of taking up your cross is, being willing to bear those burdens, because you know what? You know that God's got something better for you anyway. What about the last part? What are the practical ways that Christians can follow Christ? Remember, follow Christ means a deep level of commitment. It doesn't mean just showing up for the fun part. Hey, he's going to feed us again today? I was with him when we fed 5,000 men, not counting everybody else. Let's see if he does it again. Right? That's the fun part of following, right? But when push comes to shove, when the situation becomes more difficult, and where was this?
Do you stand up or do you fall?
Yeah. In John 6, I was going to read that really quick here. There's so many good verses that go across for this thing here. And I want to make sure I got this one right. I think we talked about this one maybe a couple weeks ago. John 6, 60 through 66. I think that's the one I want to read. Yeah. And he's talking about discipleship earlier, and he's talking about some of the aspects of what it means to follow him. It means you're going to eat my flesh and drink my blood and all these different things. And it got to that point here in verse 60. It says, therefore many of his disciples, those who were following him, not the apostles, it's not talking about, it's regular followers. Remember, there's lots of people following Jesus at that point, because it was a fun thing to do, right? Many of his disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a difficult statement. Who can listen to it? But Jesus, conscious that his disciples grumbled at this, said to them, does this cause you to stumble? What then if you see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? If the Spirit who gives life, the flesh profits nothing. The words that I have spoken to you are the spirit and are of life. And then I'm going to skip down to 66. It says, as a result of these things that he taught, many of his disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. Wow. So discipleship entails some serious following, doesn't it? And they weren't ready to do it. Some of them were not ready, and they stopped following him. You're not the flavor of the month anymore, Jesus. We're going to go someplace else for a little bit. Follow this other rabbi. That's a pretty serious thing, isn't it?
So the disciples, was that the main 12?
No.
Like,
We're talking about
the extra ones.
Yeah, we're talking about the discipleship is somebody who's following. The apostles were the called out ones.
Because you don't hear of, was Bartholomew one of them, and Nathan, or
I can't.
because you don't hear
Yeah,
of them.
a lot of them were not the flashy ones who talked a lot, apparently.
Oh, okay.
But yes, now he did go on to say that, didn't I not pick you, and yet one of you is a devil?
Right.
Judas Iscariot. He knew that. He knew that. But we're talking about the followers that were following him. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of women and men who were following just because of the things he was doing. They wanted to learn more. They were legitimate people following him. And I think Joseph of Arimathea was a follower of him also. Only a secret one.
disciple,
Yeah, because he was part of the Sanhedrin. Anyway, they rang the bell on me, so I need to finish this up. So, is following Jesus the safest path to take in life? No. It's not the safest path, but it's the best path. Yeah, I think we can say that because, but then you got to think, what are we talking about? Safe and risk taking, right?
In the long run, it's the safest path.
Yes, there you go. That's what I was trying to get to. It may not be considered the safest at one point. Like, oh, if I say this, I might lose my job, or they might make fun of me or spit on me or
So
something.
there's persecution to follow Jesus. It's
Yeah, but in the long run, it is the safest, right? It's the best. I like that terminology. Whoever said that is right. Following Jesus comes with risks, but its rewards outweigh any sacrifices we made. God really cares about our holiness, but we can rely on Him to take care of us as we pursue His perfect plan. That's true. Let's look at the last. Did I miss a verse there? No, I didn't miss a verse. Okay, let's look at the last point. See His power, and this is in the next chapter. And a lot of people might say, well, why are you taking one verse out of it? Because it kind of fits with what he was talking about here. Let's read Mark 9:1, and I want you to note the exciting promise that Jesus made. Okay? And he's including his disciples in this kind of thing here, right? Those who are following him. Who's got number 5?
And Jesus was saying to them, truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God after it has come with power. So,
that's an interesting verse. We could talk a whole lot just about on that verse, right? What exciting promise do we see him make? When he got done talking about all these things, and he got done rebuking him, Peter, for all that, and what does he tell him?
You will not taste death.
Well, no, not exactly. What's the rest of the promise?
Some of you who are standing
Until, what?
until I see the kingdom of God has come with power.
Yes. So what a lot of biblical theologians believe this is talking about directly is the transfiguration, which comes up next. But it could be a couple other things as well. I personally believe he's referring to the transfiguration because what happens right after this? The transfiguration. I'm going to read that for you real quick. Mark 9, 2 through 8. It's the next thing, the next verse says, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, and brought them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his garments became radiant and exceedingly white, as no launder on earth can whiten them. Elijah then appeared to them, along with Moses. And they were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. For he did not know what to answer, for they had become terrified at what they saw. Right? Then a cloud formed, overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." All at once they looked around, and they saw no one there anymore except Jesus alone. So a lot of theologians believe this is a glimpse of what Jesus is going to look like in the future. He's going to be radiant and glowing, right? And the picture of Elijah and Moses is the law and the prophets are together with Jesus. So this is like showing this whole package. They're getting a glimpse into a future. It's exciting. Now, a lot of people also think, some theologians think it might be also looking at his resurrection. And it could be that as well, when he's resurrected, because it applies as well. There's a lot of disciples that were following Jesus here, remember? They saw the resurrected Jesus. Wow. And again, Peter couldn't understand at the time, right? How that could happen. We couldn't understand at the time. But they saw him. So that could be a reference to that as well. Some people have tried to make it through a lot of different linguistics as to when Jesus came again, but we know that they're talking about those people who are right there. Not that generation, not those people that they represented, but those actual people is what Jesus is saying. So most biblical theologians believe along those lines. Does that make sense? Anybody got any comments or questions? It's a little bit, and again, it's one of these cryptic things a little bit. How can that be? How can we see that? Now we see how Peter, James, and John saw that with their own eyes.
They saw it.
Wow. In Mark 9, 2 through 8, I got some verses too, I think. Well, that's the first one, okay. 2 Peter 1, 16 through 18. We're out of time, I know, but I'm going to get this last verse in. Peter wrote these words, right? It says, "For we did not follow cleverly devised tales when we made known to you the power and the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ." Now, this is what he talked about, right? Talked about the coming in power, right? Peter saw this. "But we were eyewitnesses of his majesty." What was his majesty? Being transfigured into God the Son in his perfectness, right?
He was there.
Right. "For when we received honor and glory from God the Father, such an utterance as this was made to him by the majestic glory by God the Father. This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." And we ourselves heard this utterance, these words, made from heaven, when we were both with him on the holy mountain. So I think Peter thinks that's what it was. Peter's saying that, isn't he?
So do you think after this, Peter changed his mind about knowing that he was gonna be resurrected?
I think he was getting better at it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was all there yet, because remember, Peter was amazed at the tomb, right? So it was a process for Peter to come to full around from this view of Messiah to this view of Messiah. I don't think it was a quick thing. Is it a quick thing for us to come around on things like that? No, it's hard sometimes. If you've been thinking this way all your life, and now somebody's saying, "Well, no, it's actually this way." It's hard to change it. It's like trying to shift an old truck without a clutch. Ever done that before? Maybe you haven't. I have.
Yeah.
It's tricky. You have to, I won't go into it, but it's not an easy thing to do. So anyway, so in this final verse, does this give hope for us as well? Do we look forward to that time?
Yes.
We're going to see him in his kingdom and his power. We do, don't we? Does that give us hope in Jesus? Does that give us strength? It should. It should. Because that's what he wants us to do. He wanted Peter to do that. He wanted his disciples to do that as well. Conclusion here, because we're out of time. Christians follow a Savior who willingly died and was resurrected for their salvation. That's the first point. Second point, Christians find life by following Christ's agenda. In other words, Who's on the throne? Us or Christ, right? We're following him. And third point, Christians can live in anticipation of seeing God's power. So I want you to think about this question. How have you given up plans and desires so that you can pursue Christ's mission in the world? How have you done that? Is that a challenge for us? Can be, right? Remember our discussion on denying myself, taking up my cross, and following Jesus, right? That challenge is from our study today. So we want to personally examine our own life and see how well we are doing that. Are we being Christ's disciple like we should be? And that's all I'll leave you with. Think about that. Examine it, right? Any comments or questions before we close in prayer? It's a hard study, but a necessary study. Being his disciples, right? It's more than just showing up for the free food. and that's what Jesus is trying to explain. Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for all you've done for us. Thank you so much for these words from the Gospel of Mark, Lord. Peter went through some trials in his life to come around to understanding more what he should about being that follower. We see that he followed you to death. And I believe he was the one who was crucified upside down as well. Lord, I just pray you convict our hearts about how well we are doing that. How well are we following you, Lord? And how are we finding ways to share the gospel message with those that have no hope, that are lost, Lord? Thank you that you've given us that salvation, Lord. Help us to be that responsible stewards with that salvation. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. I use the word stewards because we're going to be talking about stewardship in the upcoming sermon. So stand by, those of you online, this particular YouTube channel. Pastor Matthew will be bringing us a message about stewardship, I believe, and I hope you can show up for that. Thank you for being with us, everyone. God bless you all.
Thank you. I have a question for